Good morning. My name is Lovella Singer, and I'm with the Dora Nelson African American Art and History Museum in Perris, California. And I'd like to thank the Moreno Valley Library for inviting me out to commemorate the Black History Month observance. So thank you very much for being here to take a part in that. So I'd like to share with you, first of all, our museum, the Dora Nelson, has been in Paris. We're celebrating our 22nd year, 1997 was when when our doors were open. It's the vision of Charles and Alberta Kearney, and they are the visionary and founders of Dora Nelson. Dora Nelson was a former slave who came to Paris from Georgia in 1920. She was the third member of a family of 6 to come to Paris, which was the first Negro family to arrive in Paris. She had 2 former family members there in 1900. Mary Ann Nelson, she came, worked as a domestic from Georgia, worked for 5 years, saved her money, and sent for her husband, Benjamin Nelson. And the 2 of them were the only and first blacks to come and reside and stay and remain in Paris, and they still have descendants in the area today. So once they came, Mary Ann took sick. Benjamin wrote to Dora to come and help with Mary Ann. Dora had 11 children of her own from Georgia. Now the grandchildren were in Indiana, so she came from Georgia by way of Indiana to Paris. She arrived in 1900. Unfortunately, by the time Dora arrived, Mary Ann had already passed away. And as a matter of fact, she got there just in time to bury Benjamin. So here Dora was in a brand new community, a brand new space. I say she traveled from sea to shining sea, from the Atlantic coast of Georgia to the California coast, and here in a new community at the turn of the century. So in 1920, Dora started a new life here on the West Coast as a part of what is known as the Great Migration here in these United States. So that's, in a nutshell, the summary of Dora and her story. I have a little more details there on the poster board about the history. And as I said, Mr. and Mrs. Kearney are visionary and founders of the museum. Once they learned the history, they recognized the importance of it and wanted to preserve it. So they founded the Dora Nelson Museum in honor of Dora's contribution to the community, which, by the way, that contribution was she started the first Negro church in Paris. When she got to Paris, she had 3 teenage daughters, 3 teenage granddaughters, excuse me. She was the mother of 11 children. They began having their families, and 2 of her daughters passed away in childbirth. So there were 2 sisters, and then there was another granddaughter. So they came with her. The oldest was 15, the other was 11 and 10. So that's how she came to Paris, and being the God-fearing woman she was, she wanted to go to church. In 1920, there was only 1 church in Paris. It was the all-white Congregational Church. Dora attempted to join, and they denied her membership. So she began having prayer meetings in her home, and later the church allowed her to come, and she did with her family. And but the prayer meetings continued, and as more African Americans moved to the community, they formed the First Baptist Church of Paris, which is 96 years old now, and we'll be commemorating that in 2024. So there is some wonderful history here, and as a matter of fact, before I go on, we will be commemorating the first family and their arrival, or Dora's arrival to Paris in 2020. It will be the 100th anniversary. Dora and the first 3 members of her family were former slaves, and they spent the last years of their life in Perris, California. They're buried in the Perris Cemetery. In 2017, I looked to see where they're buried, and there was no marker on their graves. So we began a campaign, and we're still on GoFundMe if you would like to support that. But through the Community Foundation and Miller Jones Mortuary and cemeteries, we were able to secure a stone for the 3 former slaves, Dora Nelson, Marianne Nelson, and Benjamin Nelson. And on February the 2nd, 2020, we will be having a commemorative event at the Dora Nelson where we will unveil the markers and, well, copies of the markers. The markers are actually on their graves now. But we will be unveiling the markers and sharing the history with the local community.
Can you send me an email when that happens so I can
Yes.
put flyers here? and let
Yes,
everybody
I will
know?
encourage you to mark your calendar for February. The date is 2/2/2020. Okay, so, and we're gonna start at 2 o'clock. So if that'll stick in your mind, I will be happy to share that with you. So again, there is a GoFundMe on page for Dora Nelson Marker, and it has a description of the event and all that we plan to do.
That church you mentioned, is that still an all-black church? Or is it integrated now?
Well, there are members of a number of ethnicities that attend there.
Okay.
Yes, but it is still in the historic African American community of Perris. As a matter of fact, on our poster board, you'll see the first, this is the first building where Dora Nelson started, and then there's the second one and the current edifice of the congregation. So there's some interesting history, and I definitely would like you to come and visit our museum, and we can share more of the details. Today's event, I'd like to share with you more along those lines of that journey of Dora and so many others, millions of others that left the South looking for a better life during the turn of the century. And so with that, we have the theme, the Great Migration, or Black Migration particularly. That theme, however, comes under a broader theme that is current this year that I'd like to draw your attention to. The poster here that we have commemorating 400 years of perseverance from 1619 to 2019 is 400 years, and we are also commemorating the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. And so we're talking about nearly 100 years ago when Dora arrived here, and the communities that she found as someone, as a new arrival, and so many others that made that trip. So I just wanted to draw attention to this commemorative observance. There will be global commemorations going on throughout the year to acknowledge this particular time in our history. And so the Dora Nelson wants to encourage everyone to honor the ancestors of the 400 years of African American resilience and perseverance. So there's a little more detail. We've joined the Association of the Study of African American Life and History, which is a national organization that was founded by Carter G. Woodson, who founded Black History Week and then month, and just so we are joining with them to share this information with our communities. And if you go online, you can find other commemorative observances that will be going on. And so this is a global.
To your website or to what website?
If you put in 400 years commemorations, okay. I'm sure you will see a variety of activities around the country and otherwise. We actually did a screening, and we plan to do it. We have yet to confirm the date. There is a documentary screening that we just did, and we will be presenting again, called 500 Years Later. And so it really includes all 7 continents of the diaspora and those who have are descendants of those that were part of the transatlantic slave trade and other ones. I'd like to just go ahead and bring your attention. Yes. Yes.
Dora Nelson.
Yes.
When she came, did she come with her husband and children, or just herself first?
No, Dora, as I mentioned earlier, she came with 3 orphaned grandchildren. But she was the 3rd adult in her family to arrive in Paris, and was a former slave. She was born in 1852 and died in 1930. She spent the last 10 years of her life in Paris and founded the first Negro institution in Paris, which was the First Baptist Church of Paris. And there's some more detail here on the board, and at the end, I hope you can look at it. So I'd like to draw your attention to this wonderful piece of documentation that was so beautifully put together by Isabel Wilkerson, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning author. And I had the privilege to do the audio book with my parents prior to their passing. They both made their transition. My mother, Dora Nelson, Alberta Kearney, and Charles. She died at 95, my dad died at 91. But I had the privilege in 2011 to share the audio book with them. And it really summarized the times of their life. And what I found that was so wonderful was that all they did was to confirm many of the things she stated in her book. And yep, that's how it was. Yep, that's what we did. And so I really felt honored to be able to share with them history that really hit home with their experience as migrants to this West Coast. And so I would like to introduce you to this author, and I would like you, in addition to today's event, we will be doing a year-long reading and discussion of the audiobook at Dora Nelson. We will be at the Dora Nelson listening and discussing on the 1st and 3rd Fridays of the month until we are through the audiobook, which is an unabridged copy of this actual text. So that will be on the 1st and 3rd Fridays from 1 to 3. And for those of you who want to join us, you are certainly welcome to come and be a part of the discussion and share your migration story. And there are 3 main characters that she chooses in her book. And one of them, all from the Deep South, and the 3 main veins of the migration, the one up north, the one to the Midwest, and then the one out far west. Well, the character in the book, Dr. Robert Pershing Foster, resided in Los Angeles, and his home is there. So in the culminating of the book, which will be around November, if we stay on schedule, we will. I'm inviting everyone to do a field trip to Dr. Pershing Foster's home there in Los Angeles. And we will plan some other interesting things to make it worth our trip. But that's one of the things that we would like to do to honor the Great Migration. So I just want to share like 2 seconds. I am first generation California. My parents, my dad's from Louisiana, a place called Bayou Gula, and he was a World War II veteran, and he ended up here in Los Angeles after his time in the military. My mother is from Texas, a little town called Benchley, Texas. And she ended up here in Los Angeles after being migrant farm workers with her, just moving all over Texas to find work, the oldest in her family. And she always started school late, went to more schools than she could remember because of the kind of work that she and her mother had to do, being raised with a single. She was the oldest of 4 children. Anyway, she ended up in California around the same time. My dad was 1 day older than her, and they met in Los Angeles, and I'm the 9th of their 11 children. So she was just, the thing I wanted to say about her being a migrant farm worker, this is our family, almost more than 50 years ago. This is our family, and somewhere I'm in there. So she had 8 sons and 3 daughters. I was going to say about my mother and her moving around and not really being able to complete school. During the last 2 years of high school, her aunt invited her to come to Houston and lived with her for the last 2 years of high school, so she could attend the first day through the last day of school. And that for her was just the most wonderful thing. She ended up valedictorian of her class in 1939. So, and she was ready to go to college, but many people didn't have the means and had to support younger siblings and help their parents, and that was her situation. But I'm quite proud to say that she had the vision. She's always been someone ahead of, her time, and, for her to come to our community.
Thank you. Maybe we should
And-
like to see it.
And
somehow.
start the museum. I mean, that was it was kind of outside the box kind of thinking. And that's the kind of person she, I was honored to have for a parent. But anyway, some magnificent stories that are portrayed in the book. So, anybody else want to share?
I actually was just wondering, so I have actually never been to your museum. Can you share a little bit about what kind of items you hold at the museum? And
Sure.
I actually thought that before I knew what your presentation was going to be on, I actually thought you were going to bring some items from the museum and talk about them.
Yeah, no,
But,
that is just.
but can you tell me a little bit about the items you have?
Yes, our focus and our mission at the museum is to, I did bring a little flyer,
Okay.
and I'll just share with you what our mission is. The Dora Nelson African American Art and History Museum exists to collect, preserve, and make available for review and study for present and future generations, artifacts, art, printed material, records of organizations which document the African American presence and contributions in the Perris Valley, the Inland Empire, and beyond. So,
Okay.
particularly, we are able to, and we are continually documenting and learning more about our local history and just trying to preserve that before it is lost. And the way my parents came upon even the idea of a museum is that our family was responsible for demolishing a building that we later learned had served as the first Negro church in Paris. And that started her, the article that you have here, it says only memories left of the first Negro church. The woman who wrote that article had informed my mother of the history of this building after it had been demolished. And she felt so bad not having known the history that she made herself a committee of one to begin researching how the Black community of Paris began. And then she began saving, collecting. And
So more
preserving.
like text and written documents, so is it more like written
Oh,
documents?
we actually have some actual artifacts as well. Of,
What kind?
that came from out of the church, actually. And we currently have, recently in our collection, we received, I think 2017, the actual, a pulpit that was gifted to the church from the Congregational church that initially denied Dora membership. You heard me mention that earlier.
Yeah.
So that we do have, we recently got that in our collection, which is something that our founder had really pursued for some time.
And what was the name of the founder of the museum again?
Alberta Mabel Kearney, Charles and Alberta Kearney. Yes.
Charles and Alberta Kearney.
Yes. So it was Alberta's vision, and it was, she encouraged my father to, accept support her vision, and he did. It wasn't overnight, but it was eventually, they were both very pleased.
So he was a contractor?
Who?
Your father?
Oh, no, my father was in the military, and he's a veteran of World War II, and he.
Okay, but you said that they demolished the church. Who demolished it? I think I'm the
Oh, okay, yes. When our family moved to the neighborhood that we were in, I said they were from Los Angeles.
Right.
And we came out in 1957, and we lived about 5 miles outside of the town of Perris, in a rural, like on 10 acres. And then my parents, with us being the 11 of us, they continued to keep their jobs in Los Angeles and come down twice a month. That was from 1957 to 1964. In 1964, at that time, we stayed with our grandparents. In 1964, they bought a home in the city limits of Perris on 7th Street. Well, prior to that, when we did stay with our grandmother, we were members of the First Baptist Church in Perris. And so we knew people through our fellowship with the church. When we moved on 7th Street, we still knew the families there, but we were new to the neighborhood. And so 2 doors down from where the home they bought was this structure that was vacant. And so my mother said when she passed there, she admired the screen doors. They were Victorian style screen doors that were on the house, and it was vacant. And she said every time she passed there, she thought, oh, I'd love to have those doors for my home. You know, what a shame that, you know, nobody's enjoying them. So from 1964 to 1970, the house stood vacant. And then the city tagged the house to be repaired or destroyed in 1970. Mother contacted the owner with the goal just to get the doors, to demolish the house. And so it was a job that our family did. And I was like 11 years old at the time. And it was a summer project, and we did it. She got the doors, and you know, it was a very interesting task. The building was old, and it had square nails, and Mother was saying, well, look at these nails, they don't make them like they used. These are handmade. And then I remember we found in the floorboards, or under the floorboards, old newspaper that said 1920. It was all brown, but you could see some of the images and the contrast of then and now, you know. And so it was quite an interesting experience. And but it was like about 2 weeks after that, this friend of my mother's who wrote for the Press Enterprise and the Perris Progress said, who on earth tore down that old church? My mother said, what old church? She said the house that stood on the corner of 7th and F Street was the first Negro church in Perris. And Willa Mae Taylor's grandmother started the church. And of course, at that, my mother felt bad. We knew Willa Mae Taylor. We knew who she was. She was an elder woman at our church who was very well known.
Hannah?
Taylor.
Taylor.
And what had happened is she was one of the 3 teenage granddaughters of Dora Nelson. But we didn't know the story. So that was like, you know, 50 years prior. And so the story goes, you know, she began the research there. And it was 10 years after that, she had the privilege, she got invited to join the National Council of Negro Women in Washington, and she went to their conference that had been in Washington, D.C. that year. She had the privilege to go on a tour and met Dr. Dorothy Height. She, someone, if you don't know, Google her up. She died in 2009.
Height.
Dr. Dorothy Height, and she passed away at age 98 in 2009, and President Obama did her eulogy. So that's just to aside, if you want to know what it takes for a president to do your eulogy, check out Dr. Dorothy Height, outstanding, phenomenal woman. But she had the privilege to meet her on a tour of the home of Mary McLeod Bethune. And another woman that we can learn about, outstanding African-American woman. She served in several presidential cabinets as an advisor, 3 or 4, possibly more. And in visiting her home, my mother had observed how it had been restored and used as an archive for Black women's scholarly studies there in Washington, D.C. And it was on that tour, she literally turned to Dr. Height, who was leading the tour, and said, what do you think the possibility of us having a museum like this in Perris? Dr. Height turned to her and said, the possibilities are as great as the faith you have to believe. And with those words, Mother came back determined to have a museum in our community. And it was a 17-year journey from that time up until the doors opened, with many reasons to quit, give it up, throw your hands up. And but she persevered, and today we have a museum. and I'm honored to have the privilege to continue the legacy that they started. So I appreciate you allowing me to share with you. I welcome you to come give me a call, and I'll be happy to give you a tour. Admission is free to our museum. We'll take groups, small or large. You're welcome. So thank you very, very much.